joining our webinar today regarding the SWA Tools Portal, our newly launched Tools Portal. Just one housekeeping note before we begin. We'd be grateful if you would add your name to the chat, as well as if there's anyone joining with you for the webinar today. I'm also going to add a link in just a moment to the Tools Portal, so you can use that link to access it during the webinar in case you'd like to reference it. We have a great presentation with lots of visuals. So as I mentioned, SWA has recently launched a Tools Portal with the purpose of collecting, organizing, and disseminating WASH resources. That portal currently contains more than 30 resources. Leslie, if you'd go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Here, I won't go through this line by line, but you all can see how we intend to structure our webinar today. My colleagues, Satali, who I think you all know very well from the SWA Secretariat, and Leslie Pass will be the presenters for the discussion. Leslie is largely responsible and should get great praise for helping to create and develop the Tools Portal. So she will go through it in great detail. And we'll have lots of time for questions, but if you have a question during the discussion, please feel free to also add that to the chat. Leslie, I think I'll leave it at that very brief introduction so that we can focus much more on what you and Satali have to share. So would you like to take it over from here?
Sure. Thanks, Marissa. And hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest in the Tools Portal and for joining us today. And thanks, Marissa, also for your great introduction. I'm not going to go in such great details. As you say, it's going to be just 10 slides, I think. But I really do hope it's enough to get people wanting to look into the portal a bit more and understanding how it works. So I'll start with a very brief overview. I'm not sure how much everyone here already knows about the initiative behind it, but I'll just give you a quick overview. First of all, we wanted, the Country Process Working Group wanted a tool to support countries and development partners to help put the WASH building blocks and collaborative behaviors into practice. And the logic behind it, or the rationale, is that there's already so many tools and resources out there. There's just so many things for national governments that already exist to help them strengthen the enabling environment for WASH. And individual partners are continuously developing useful tools and resources, but all of these are not always easy to find or to navigate through. It's kind of almost like a crowded field. This portal aims to make these kinds of tools and resources more accessible and much more easy to navigate. So that's the basic premise behind it. We wanted to find a way to organize these kinds of tools so that, I mean, in the myriad of possibilities in the WASH sector, that people would know exactly what they need and what they could use it for. So the objectives, in a nutshell, were to provide a one-stop shop through which tools and resources can be selected to support the implementation of WASH building blocks and collaborative behaviors appropriate to the specific context and purpose for which they are needed. We also wanted to provide a platform facilitating easy access to experiences gained and lessons learned by different actors and in different countries who have used the tools. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later because this deals with our niche. We asked ourselves, well, what's different about our tool portal? Because there are actually other tool portals out there, but ours is special, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we specifically target national level governments who are aiming to strengthen the WASH sector, and as well, they're implementing partners, obviously. And we also want to have tool developers learn something from this tools portal. So by sort of gathering tools developers together, there's something we also want them to learn from this this initiative. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But first of all, I'll just give you an example of the tools that we launched with. So they're organized by building block. They're in a visual format. This is just a list. But so we have, for example, right now I've got some, 5 tools per building block. You can take a look at those. There's a couple slides here with those. With the caveat that actually the tools in themselves, they aren't built according to the building block categories. So a lot of the tools out there could probably be categorized across 2 or 3 different categories. So in some cases, the tools are relevant to even all of the categories, but the point is we want to keep them so that if you're looking to strengthen your enabling environment and you say you want to, improve financing, that you could easily just filter by financing and find sort of the most relevant tools in that area. So, as I said, this is an example. We launched with, I think, 33 tools. So right now I've just showed you actually a total of 30. In addition to the building blocks, we have one area that's cross-cutting. So it includes things like the SDGs. It includes advocacy. I think we have the SDGs in the policy sector. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details in a second. But just to go with the broader picture, the niche. So we sat down and we thought, what have we got to offer that isn't already out there? And besides the thing that it focuses on supporting the implementation of the specific SWA framework, right? So in particular, the principles, the building blocks, and the collaborative behaviors. This is, I think, the main focus is that it serves the instrument as an instrument to SWA and all of its collaborators and partners. But also, the enabling, we've got a functionality in it. We enable the view of tools by tool users. So this picture here shows on each tool page, like for example, this is the wash bottleneck analysis tool. You can go in and click write a review if you a government or an implementing partner, and you can give your experience on what happens. So we see these kinds of reviews available across the internet nowadays on product sites. So you've bought a product, let's say a fridge, and you want to evaluate if it's a good fridge or not, you can do that. We wanted to experiment with that here. So it's a little bit, it's not just a thumbs up or thumbs down or we liked or we didn't. There's a little bit of a form that a person would fill out, and it's brief. So what did you think of the tool? What's its strengths? What are its weaknesses? And things like that. You can click in there and check it out online. And so the idea with this is after you gather several reviews, of course, the users who would be the governments or the implementing partners, when they look at a tool, they'll be able to decide whether that tool is appropriate for their needs or not, based on these reviews in part, right? And the second part is the related publications, which is, it's linked to each tool. It's a section where tool developers can upload all relevant sort of implementation reports regarding tools. So those are the official case studies that are published regarding tools used. Many tool developers have these. And so we wanted it to be a quick place where you go into a tool page. You can see users' reviews based on opinions, and you can see implementation reports all in one stop. And we really do think that's the added value and the niche that we're working in here. So just want to take a pause here and remind everyone, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll deal with them at the end. There's like 30 minutes for questions and even longer. And also let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. We're almost actually halfway through, so I'll move on. So what I've done for this presentation is I've taken screenshots of the site rather than showing the live site, because sometimes bandwidth doesn't allow it. And I've actually added little red boxes so that just to step through the way the site's set up. So I'll do this quickly here. At the top, the first box here where it says number 1, this is how we've set up the tools portal it's according to the building blocks plus the cross-cutting areas. So I mentioned the cross-cutting areas before. They are, it's just loading now. I just wanted to recall what they were. So they are advocacy and communications, reduction of inequalities, and WASH sustainability. So in addition to the building blocks that I'm sure you're all aware of, sector policy strategy, institutional arrangements, those building blocks, we also have those cross-cutting areas. In this section, box number 2, we have the guidance on how to use the portal. So several documents, or 5 or 6 key documents, just explaining how you would write a review, how you could submit a tool, how could you include an implementation report, and things like that. So it's pretty step-by-step, simple. This section on the main page, whereas number 3, are the action points or action areas. So we have subcategories under each building block, and they're designed to help identify specific functionalities of the tools, as well as helping users to think about the actions they would take to achieve the building blocks. So when you're on the site, you can actually just hover over, and it'll give you an example of each of the tools within that building block, each of the action points. So I've got the site open on my screen beside me, and I'm hovering over. I don't know if anybody else has as well. But, for example, under sector policy and strategy, we have 3 action areas. One of them is national planning for WASH. Then we have SDG integration and sector diagnosis. So if you're a developer, a tool developer, or a tool user, and you know that you need to work on SDG integration, you can actually search and filter by that term, and you'll be automatically filtering under the first building block, sector policy strategy. It helps us get a little bit more granular and more practical as well. So number 4 here is the site has some navigation aids. So once you've been searching through the tools and you've seen a few of them, on the bottom right here, you will always be seeing the last couple of tools that you've seen. So moving forward. This is the main, I think the strength of the functionality of this tool is a detailed filter, number 5. So tools can be filtered by these action points. Well, the actual building blocks, right? So of the 5 major building blocks, and each of them have 3 little action points accompanying them. There's also, you could filter by scope, which could be a tool that's either national or subnational or both. Subsector, which are tools that are focused on urban, rural, or both. You can choose by language. The grand majority right now of the tools are in English. Well, all of them are in English. Several of them have French versions available, and there's a few with Spanish. I think there's been one with Arabic. So you can filter by those. And you can also filter by which tools actually have reviews and implementation reports. Just a quick note, at the moment, because we've just launched, we're still working on getting those reviews. We're going out, this is part of our next phase. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we're also working on with the tool developers to get them to upload their implementation reports. So it's still a work in progress, but we are building that, and it's part of our ongoing work right now. So the tools list here, number 6. I mean, before I showed you a table in Excel, but this one is actually online. You'll get a screenshot of if it's a publication of the cover, or if it's a website, you'll get a screenshot here, like a little thumbnail, the title that's clickable, and a blurb, just like a couple sentences about it, and read more. And then once you go into the tool, then you get a longer description. So that's the general setup of it. When you're inside the tool, you can see this again, what you've seen, the short description at the top would be number 7. Where number 8 is where you can click to see the tool reviews or submit a review, or actually in an implementation report. And then number 9 here shows the long description. And at the bottom you have the navigation aids again, so all the other tools that are in the same building block. And here, as I said, if you look on the right again, those the two tools that, or the most recent tools that you've seen. So, actually, just before I go and talk about how we're going to push this forward, one thing I wanted to mention that I don't think I emphasized enough in the slides is that tool developers, they can actually add a tool as well. So it's on the main part of the site in the, I'll go back just a couple of slides. Here in the guidance menu, I mentioned it briefly before, there's a link that says add a tool, and there's a front page form where tool developers anywhere in the world can upload their tool, which would be to help them fill out all those sections in the tool page that I just showed. And then an administrator at SWA would go in and approve that tool, just so that we don't have, of course, spammers adding any old things. So it's a very versatile tool in that sense, because the SWA administrators are not bottlenecks in the process. They just need to approve. They don't need to write about the whole tool or make all these decisions about what's the appropriate categorization. The actual tool that developers can do the entire tool setup themselves, and it just needs to be approved. So they would go and have this whole page set up automatically when they input their tools information. And one other thing as well I'd like to explain is we have within that guidance section, actually, for tool developers, if you're a tool developer and you go to put your tool up, it will tell you, okay, before you put it up, just review the tool criteria. Does your tool really fit the criteria? And this is actually part of our niche. So I think maybe these slides are going to have an extra slide put in after for those who are downloading the presentation. The niche also is that we're not dealing with the hardware of WASH. So this is where there's hundreds of guidance on the internet, you know, the kind of pump that you can put on, different kinds of latrine covers. That's not part of this portal. We're definitely a lot more, I guess, on the software part. So guidance, strengthening the enabling environment, that's our main focus, but I think it's worth it to say, you know, we're not looking at hardware, we're looking at the software of it, the higher level guidance for governance and for policy. So with that, what we have coming forward, an important part of it is that governments and implementing partners will know how to use this portal. The more people that know about it, obviously, the richer the portal will be, because we'll have the tools in there, they'll be properly categorized and filtered, and it will fulfill its function, right? So this is why, first of all, we have this guidance for governments and implementing partners on the website. But we also are in the process of finalizing a user guide that will be uploaded there in PDF that people can download, as well as these webinars, launches, and training sessions. And also for the country process working group and the SWA Secretariat, we're doing some training with meetings and so forth, and they can also access this guidance that I mentioned. And we have a manual for back-end use by portal administrators already developed. So we've got that covered for training and guidance, but if you have more suggestions, we'd love to hear it. And I think I'm going to call on Sitali to talk a bit more about the bigger picture, linking with other SWA processes. Sitali, are you there?
Yes, I am here. And Leslie, just before I think I explained this slide, there is a question, and I think that it would be good if you actually responded to this question. It's more about the technical aspect of the tools that we currently have. And the question is from Jochen at the African Development Bank. Jochen, your line is unmuted. If you wanted, just so we can also hear your voice, if you wanted to bring it up, and then Leslie can take that and maybe other questions, and then I can tackle this slide, and then we can move to the others. If that's okay, Leslie, I would suggest we do it that way.
Yeah, of course, sure. Jochen, I'd love to hear you talk, but if not, I can read out your question.
Okay, now I unmuted on my side. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's simply the question, what kind of resources do you offer? Is it PDF files? Is it PowerPoint templates? Or do you also offer executable files, program files for download?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Well, actually, we don't upload any of the tools at all. We're just linking to people's websites or to their PDFs. So we don't actually house them. So if you're a developer and you're submitting your tool through the online, through the front end, there's a section at the very bottom where it says, select which button you would like to include. And the option is go to website or download PDF. So we should actually have, Satali, come to think of it, we should have an option that says download Excel, because a couple of the tools are Excel worksheets. So to answer you more directly, every single format is available because it would be according to what the developer is offering, and it would be on their own site and how they would usually offer it to their users. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also easier to manage that kind of approach, because you always have the latest version coming from the owner of the tool.
Yeah, and then we hopefully avoid having, to go back every year and say, oh, is your tool, is the link still working? Is it still working?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand. That's good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your question. So back to you, Satali.
Yes, thank you so much. So just trying to check to make sure there isn't another question that we might need. Okay. So we thought we could also, was there somebody else who wanted to ask a question?
Yes, Satali, is it possible for me to ask a question now?
Yes, please.
All right, my name is Nicholas. I'm from Zenith Water Project. Let me first thank the SWA Secretariat for putting up this, quite interesting. Now, what I want to find out, let's assume you go to the planning, monitoring, and review, the building block there, the planning, monitoring, and review. When you get down there on the building block action area on the right-hand side, if you go to the subsector and go under the subsector, you see urban is 0. So my understanding is we don't have any article or any tool that is addressing the urban area. That is obviously what somebody can just think almost immediately. While under rural, we have 1. Then just below that, you have both urban and rural, 9. So my understanding is that we have 9 articles or 9 tools within the subsector that if you choose them, you want to filter it down to that, you will be able to, to see how urban and rural subsector areas have been described within that tool. So why is it that urban is 0, or is it something that still needs to be updated?
That's also a good question too. So the filter system there, it was a conscious decision to put the number of tools that would be beside each filter value, right? So in that case, we see urban 0. It actually means that there are in the subcategory of, or the building block, planning, monitoring, and review. So there are 10, it says that if you scroll to the top, it'll say planning, monitoring, and review, showing 10 results. So there's 10 tools so far that are categorized under that. And as of those 10, none of them are specifically just for urban wash. One of them is specifically for rural urban wash. And the other 9 are both. So in other words, the developer hasn't really specified, oh, this is just for urban wash, or this is just or mainly for rural wash, right? That's the difference there. So when it's both urban and rural, maybe it should just say not specified. Actually, these kinds of questions, the finer questions, are what we're hoping to get user feedback on. So what are the points that make you feel confused, right? Because when you're working on developing a portal like this, everything starts to make sense repeatedly over time because you've looked at it so much, right? But this is an interesting point. But Nicholas, I would ask you, if you scroll to the top and you see the menu, if you're interested in only tools that are rural, then go to the click. If you click, there's all the building blocks, right? There's sector policy, institutional arrangements, and all those things. After cross-cutting areas, you can filter by all tools. So if you click on all tools, you'll still have the same filter list at the right, but then you'll also get to see all of the tools that are specifically urban and all that are specifically just rural. So let me see what it comes up with. It's interesting, though, your question as well. We were struggling with, what are the filters? What were people going to want to filter by? And we chose to take out some more granularity there because in addition to, for example, subsector urban and rural, you could also separate out sanitation, water, health, right? And so in the end, we thought not, because actually the grand majority of tools are for all of them. They don't specify. So it would be like all three, sanitation, water, and health. As you can see, so in all the tools, if you've done that, you can see there's actually only 2 of the 33 tools that are specifically for urban, and 2 that are specifically focusing on rural. And then the majority, 29 of them, it says, are for both urban and rural. So does that make sense to you now? And actually, do you have a suggestion? Do you think it would be better to have it not specified?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't mind, just one more and probably last question. Is that okay, or should I ask this question later on?
No, go on.
I'm fine with it. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to find out. Yeah, how do we actually? Because it has taken the. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it has taken SWA Secretariat and Administrative, to put this on. How will SWA Secretariat also monitor the partners are actually taking this thing, seriously? Because with this, I think we can actually move the whole SWA vision forward. But what I see from different interaction with different people, like people do not really have so much time to go into this, to really study it and see how it can actually help them. Now, what are the plans for the Secretariat to make sure that this is the first webinar, and to make sure that people get to understand this and people get to use it? That's number one question. Number two, I have seen that most of the reports are from almost 2010, down there, or 2000, or even below that. Is there any range in terms of the latest reports that, SWA would say will not obviously upload any of the tools, maybe I wouldn't say outdated tools, tools that are not, most, recent, so that we'll not be able to be reading things that maybe somebody wrote in 2009 or in 2005, that there are other reports that must have, overtaken that. What are the plans in doing that? Sorry if I asked too many questions.
No, sure. I hope I can remember all of them. So the first one, I think, is what are we doing to make sure people understand how to use all these? So I outlined a couple of them in the last slide. I'll just go back one more second. We have these training and guidance initiatives. So besides what's on the site, we're also in the process of developing a downloadable user guide. We're actually in the process right now, Nicholas, of a soft launch. We made the decision, a soft launch meaning it's been disseminated to a couple mailing lists, like our principal partners and things like that, but we don't want it widely out there. We haven't presented it at any conferences or anything yet because we're in this sort of field testing phase. We've already gone through some first stage tests, obviously. The CPWG has looked at it, some people from the steering committee, and it's been approved in general. And now we're in the stage where we want to just tweak it a bit more and these kinds of things, make sure we're using the right terminology so people aren't getting confused while filtering and things like that. So before we go on to a more aggressive launch and dissemination, we're going to be taking a couple of months just to do these kind of improvements. And you might even hear back from us shortly saying, oh, please fill out this evaluation form or some form for suggestions on how to improve the portal as it is now. But in a nutshell, we have a plan going forward, and so we want it. It's not just a one-off where we've launched it and then that's it. We are going to be working together with tools developers we're going to go back to them, hopefully in a scheduled manner over the coming I don't know if Sitali can talk to you about the scheduling that we have, if it's 2 or 3 years or whatever, but we want to come back and have tools developers learn from this. So what are the tools users saying in their opinions? What are the tools maybe that are replicated? Where's the gaps in the field? So that component has been considered. It's a long-term plan going forward. In terms of, so back to the other training guidance, how do people know how to use it? So like right now we're in the process of setting up meetings, these webinars for governments and implementing partners. And then, as I've mentioned previously, we also have, importantly, this SWA Secretariat and CPWG will be having more meetings. So we have sort of high-level buy-in, and we definitely want to bring this forward because there's a huge potential for learning on all sides, implementers, government, as well as tool developers, right? So it just needs to continuously, I think, be, we have to tap in and check if we're on the right track, develop relationships with tool developers and with users. So I hope that answers that question. And then also about the year, it's an interesting question as well. I tried my best when we were going through and looking at tools to get the most recent ones. So actually I think that you can filter if you go to just below the menu, you can filter by year of publication. So actually just newer or older so far. We had it by actual year. You could have filtered like only tools that are earlier than 2010, or in the sense of they were made after 2010 or tools before, but we removed that because I think everybody wants the latest first, the most recent first.
Sure.
It is an interesting point about a cutoff date. So once your tool is more than 8 years old, does it drop off the platform? I don't know. So actually, those are the things we have to work through. I think we can, tools that have a certain, like 10 years old or more, we could maybe indicate that so that people can filter them out. They don't need to look at that. I think it's an interesting suggestion. I'll let Sitali speak to some of those things as well. Nicholas, was there another question that I missed?
No. You've done so well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thanks. And those are interesting questions that I've taken note of because it's actually the first time we're getting this kind of feedback from actual people that are sort of outside of the core group that has been working on it. So this is great. I'll hand over to Sitali back on his slides. And
Yes,
unless
thank you so
Sitali,
much.
do you have anything else you want to add to what I've just said?
I will add after I make this slide, after I talk about the slide, because I think one of Nicholas's questions is linked to what is on the slide, and I think I can piggyback from there.
Great.
So are we back all right, so we are back on this slide. So what we thought we could also just add is in the whole big context of SWA and other processes that are related to what partners are doing, how would you use this portal in those processes? And there could be more ways of how you could use the portal as already indicated, but I'll just highlight here 3 possible avenues. So one is that you possibly are already aware of the SWA Framework, which basically articulates the principles that every partner agrees to at the time that they're joining SWA. That framework also has the collaborative behaviors and the building blocks. So we see these tools, the portal, as being very useful when partners are doing analytical work or consultations which are related to any aspect of the SWA framework. It could be about having discussions on the collaborative behaviors, on national leadership, or on systems development and use of those systems. We think that we would want to encourage partners to think of the tools portal as their go-to place where they could find a tool that's useful to their work. So yes, it's organized in now per building block, but you also realize that some of the tools would actually be applicable even beyond that those categories of the building blocks. And so we think that if partners are actually taking a journey on to put in place any aspect of the SWA framework, that they could use the portal as perhaps their first point of call to see what's available here, and then pick that material, use it, come back and give feedback. It may also be that you've come across a tool that's useful in your work, but it's not yet on the portal, and if you're on the portal you don't find it, let us know, then we can put it there, and that can also help us reach or assist another partner that might be intending, or rather be looking for a tool that you might have used. Then the second opportunity that we have now is with the mutual accountability mechanism. We talked about this in our last webinar, I believe it was at the end of July, where we presented the mutual accountability mechanism. This is a mechanism through which partners at a country level will work with government leadership to put in place or agree their priorities towards the SDGs, and also table commitments, first those commitments tabled by the government, and then other SWA partners adding their commitments to actually support the government. So that process of developing commitments, the commitments are actually an outcome of that process, but the input is a lot of work related to the analytical progress of where the analytical work to look at the challenges that the country is having, where the gaps are, and how to address those gaps. And again, in that process, the tools portal would be very useful to identify some of the tools that could be used to do the analysis, to agree on to prioritize, to identify some of the solutions, and then develop the commitments that would be required in that process. So we think that in this implementation of the mutual accountability mechanism, the tools portal becomes also a critical source of resources. And then the third area is around the high-level political dialogue. So just to explain these terms, the high-level political dialogue refers to the cycle of meetings that the SWA runs. These are the sector ministers meeting, which happen every 18 months, and the finance ministers meeting, which happens every 3 years. So with the sector ministers meeting, we are in fact just starting off to prepare for the next one, which will take place next year in April in Costa Rica on the 4th and 5th. This is a meeting where ministers responsible for water, sanitation and hygiene would be invited. It might be 1 or 2 ministers or more in your country. Now, as we know from the past, the meeting itself is just one moment, is an event, but there's a big process prior to the meeting, and also there's a process of follow-up after that. These sector ministers meetings will also be crucial for the mutual accountability mechanism now, and in the preparations for that meeting, we will explain the key things that the ministers should come to the meeting prepared to discuss. And we think that the tools portal in that process will also become a critical source of information, a critical source of materials, again to contribute towards that analytical work at country level, towards agreeing those critical priorities at country level, and towards delivering those priorities. So I talked about the sector ministers meeting next year, and after that will be the finance ministers meeting, which will be in spring of 2020, at the around the time of the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF in Washington. So just so people are aware, this cycle of meetings is what are called the high-level political dialogue. And it includes the preparations for those meetings, the actual meetings themselves, where also commitments are tabled or discussed, and progress is also discussed. And then there's also a follow-up to that process. So we think that in this high-level political dialogue cycle, this tools portal also becomes very relevant. So how do we know that this is very helpful or this has actually been used? So it is one thing to sort of put it out there, put the tools so people are aware. Having this webinar is part of that process, and also explaining it and sharing it in other meetings. That's another way. So at the Africa Water Week, for example, I think it would be good if those partners that are there, you could already begin to inform people about the tools portal, that it's there. So in case they want to submit a tool, they want to submit a review, or they want to download a tool for their use, please give them that information. I think for us what is also critical is if people interact with the website and come back to give feedback on how that tool was utilized. So that's the way for us who know that actually this has been used. But the biggest path for this to succeed is if our partners could, in those country discussions, in those workshops, in the seminars, could whenever the opportunity arises, could actually share more about the tools portal. So if there's a joint sector review, planning for that joint sector review, I think that's the moment to think, what tool do we need, and can we find it on the portal? And if it's not there, but you thought that it would be necessary to have it there, let us know, because then it could be that it's already in existence somewhere else and we just didn't put it here. We will go and look for such a tool, and if we can't find it, we'll give you feedback, but if we find it, then we'll provide it. So in one way, I think let us use this as an interactive process, as a live portal where you can give us feedback on what you find, but also let us know if there's something which you're looking for which we do not have, and we'll be able to say if it passes the quick test of is it about hardware or is it about enabling environment and the software. We'll be able to tell you if because that's sort of the first criteria. Beyond which then we sort of begin to go into, well, if it is around the enabling environment, the software aspects, where does it fall in the portal? But if it is about hardware, our response will be very quick on that. So if you have a tool that needs to be added, let us know. But if you also are looking for a tool which you can't find, give us that feedback. If you found a tool, you've used it, also provide feedback. That way then we can begin to know if this is actually adding value to your work. And more importantly, in those discussions about sector review or coordination, I think if you mention this, that would be helpful. If you identify something that is needed, just stressing again that might be the perfect moment to actually raise attention to the portal. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted to add for this slide.
That's great. Thank you, Satali. Does anyone have actual question for Satali on any of those linkages? Well, you can put it in the chat. There's still time. Just as a reminder, if anyone arrived after Marissa, our moderator, she placed the link to the tools portal in the chat. It's up near the beginning of the chat. And we encourage you, if you want to look at it right now, go ahead. We know you can hear at the same time you're looking at the tools portal. We just have a couple more slides. And do please put your questions in, because we'll deal with them. We're just going to wrap up with the slides. So Satali was mentioning this before. So we have these future activities planned. The user trainings are going to be held. The toolkit use and dissemination is going to be promoted among partners. And we're going to do that in strategic ways. We also are going to be seeking additional feedback on the use and functionality of the portal. So the kinds of things we've been talking about with Nicholas now and with Jochen previously when he asked, how does it actually work? So those kinds of things we want to make sure they're super crystal clear when users come to the site. And we're hoping that people who look at it would be happy to give us this feedback. We're just setting up a little form that will give us the feedback where people who go to the site will be able to click on it. So, sorry, it's all quite still work in progress, pardon me. And also to let you know, we're in the midst of doing a French translation. So it's not that we've jumped the gun and we launched ahead of time. We're done this soft launch just so that when we really do the official launch, everything's in place and tweaked. And so that's our idea. We also have back to the question of the ongoing strategic outreach, right? So this is going to be sort of more of a long-term view. So the whole thing about talking with tool developers to make sure their tools are there, making sure that they're addressing needs. So if we can identify what needs or what gaps there are, the tool developers would know that, and also that they would solicit these kinds of feedback from their users. That it's like honest, candid feedback. Like, what did you really think of our tool when you used it? Like, what were the tough parts? And please let us know. And here's an online form. You can do it anonymously, or you can leave your name. And because that would really be helpful to improve the whole toolscape out there, if developers would know that. And also, we want to improve the aspects of collaboration. So Satali mentioned that it's a living sort of tool, so it's going to always be hopefully growing and adding dimensions to it, so like more implementation reports for the tools, more user reviews, not just more tools, but also those things. But also that it would reflect collaboration not only from people using tools or wanting the tools, but also the tool developers would begin to talk among themselves and say, look, I think we've covered this aspect of the software adequately. Let's move on to these gaps. So, yeah, and I think to finalize, I think we just have a thank you slide and another request. If you have any questions, comments, we'd love to hear it, suggestions. If you've managed to get the tool portal open and you're going through it. So like I said, these are the things we're working on right now. A feedback form that will be online. The French translation. And some strategy for dissemination. Tally, if you can think of other things that I'm missing. Reaching outreach to our, as Satali mentioned, to the tool developers and to tool users. So
do we have a
can I just
question?
ask you?
Yeah, please. Go ahead, please.
No? Is this for me or somebody else wants to ask a question?
No, I think that's for you. Please go ahead.
Okay. This question is for Satali. Satali, you've mentioned, which is quite interesting, that wherever partners are gathered, either in a workshop or conference or anything specifically like the African Water Week, which hopefully I will be there. What kind of approach are you suggesting or advising that one should use to also highlight or let other partners know who probably are not as active as others? Is it just one-on-one discussions, or is it maybe a summarized slides, maybe 2 or 3 that one can just quickly or immediately, email to them with some links that will not make them to go and start, reading up about these very important tools? How do you intend to? What would be your advice, Italy, on how we can actually assist other partners get to know about this and the importance of SWA tools?
Sorry, my line was on mute. Thank you so much, Nicholas. That's a really, really great question. So, in fact, I think you provide us a very good suggestion, because what we could do is to prepare that very short set of slides, maybe 2 or 3, that we can provide to you and other partners. So if you have a chance where you're making a presentation, you can then just add those to that as well. So then you could have the actual link to the portal as it is now, the key aspects about the portal, which are that they can find tools per building block, and that they could, if they have a tool which they have developed or used, they could submit that tool so that it could be added. And if they have used a tool, they could go to the website and provide a review. If they are having a national consultation or discussion or meeting and they don't know which tool to use, this is a place they can go to and find that tool, and that they should remember to always come back and drop some feedback. So we could provide you a very quick set of slides, just so then you could add to those opportunities you have for those discussions. I think that's something possible we could do from our side, and I think it also begins to set the ball rolling as we go. Now, I think there was also one aspect which I wanted to highlight, which, I mean, there's the formal and there's the informal way. I think the formal is these opportunities where you have workshops and you're presenting. I think the informal way is much more, and for me, I see these as sort of happening in those national coordination meetings, those maybe conversations with other sector actors, could be with the government or other partners, where you could just highlight or indicate to them you're just from this webinar, or you've actually visited the tools portal, and what your impressions are of that, because then that just begins to spread the news a bit more widely, and then they might also have some additional things that they could put here. So then you could always pass on that information to them or to us. Thank you. I think that was a great question, and hopefully the response is helpful. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Itali. It was helpful. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Satali and Leslie?
Just to say that our colleague Abera from Ethiopia is on the phone, and he had indicated that he might want to say something.
Yeah, hello. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Abera, we can hear you.
Hello, Chitali.
Yeah.
Yes, great. Thanks. So just thank you for the SWA HLM, the Secretariat, organizing this webinar session. As usual, this is the very important and golden opportunity where we can just attend this in our destination in our locality. So I think this online webinar is very, very supportive and helpful for those who have the interest to, make changes and deliver commitments of both local and international commitments that state countries have already taken into account of. So just very briefly, with regard to the points which have been raised in the discussion, one point which I want to share is just some 2-3 weeks before, there have been, this issue of this, platforms of webinar sessions, discussions, and the different, meetings, online meetings are very, very important. But on top of that, I think the sector shouldn't, miss out the issue of mobilizing resources for delivering commitments. And it's only during, that time that, countries can implement their SDG and the country, program plans in the water sector. So some 3 weeks before, we have had a meeting, a training workshop in Johannesburg, in South Africa, whereby all African countries are called for a technical training, organized by the GWP and in consultation with GCF, the Green Climate Fund, whereby all African countries, especially the water sector, sectors responsible for the water sector, are, called for that training. It took us 3-4 days, and the colleagues from the GCF have provided us, technical training on the project preparation and concept note development for submitting to GCF, board members, so that when approved, countries can have, the available resources for, African countries, so that they can implement the WASH program. And I think there have been some misunderstanding between the different sectors within a given country. A good example could be Ethiopia itself. And we were, called from 3 ministries. GCF is communicating with Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and Ministry of Finance and Economic Cooperation. For the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change being the national designated authority, and Ministry of Finance being the direct access entity for GCF. And Ministry of Water, the water sector ministries are in many of the African countries are delivery entities. And the point I want to share to this group is, there should be a proper and strong coordination between the line sectors, the line ministries, like between Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Electricity in the case of Ethiopia, with Ministry of Finance and Cooperation, Economic Cooperation, and Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. These three ministries need to coordinate to develop a standard and bankable concept note and project proposal for GCF, so that they can release, the available, millions and billions of dollars for funding the water sector. Now, resource is competitive, so African countries need to prepare ourselves and to share our experience and to deliver, the planned programs for service delivery. That's where I think we can be able to, meet our commitments in the SDG and the respective country programs. So now here in Ethiopia, we have trying to develop different concept notes. We have already submitted. Some of the concept notes have been approved by the GCF board member in Korea, and currently we are, informing the leadership, the ministers. Especially, Dr. Suleshi, there has been, a new restructuring of the government, federal structure. Just yesterday, it was notified by the Prime Minister. So we are lucky that Dr. Suleshi has already continued again. He was one of the only 4 ministers who are supposed to continue, leading the water ministry. So he's a world-class person. We have already nominated him to be one of the steering committee for the secretariat. So we are working with UNICEF, Ethiopia country office. They are strong enough to support us. They are always, with us supporting, and the ministry is very conscious working with them so that, those technical inputs from the development partners can be, brought into strengthening the country level, relationships. The other point is, very recently, some 2 months before, I will be sharing to Italy, there has been a national high-level, steering committee meeting chaired by the Ministry of Water and other ministers and, development partners, including the World Bank, the DFID, UNICEF, AFDB, the African Development Bank, heads are attending, and regional, high-level leaderships are attending. So that steering committee meeting is organized once in 6 months, and very high-level, wash sector agenda is brought into a table for discussion, and that is well minuted, and the National Coordination Office, which is coordinating the overall national program, is, circulating that minute for follow-up, and there will be a shared responsibility of that. The other final point I want to share is, as Sitali mentioned, we are going to attend the African Water Week, which is to be organized in Senegal. So we are preparing ourselves for that, and the phase 2 of the One Wash National Program, which is to continue, until 2022, in another 5 years, and donors are, welcoming for that program to be funded, including the World Bank, which is the largest financer and the bigger donor. So we are also attracting different, financiers of the sector. So, now, as a result of this climate change, the budget required for financing the wash sector is becoming very immense, very high, and very, significant. In that case, we need to tap each and every, resources. The good thing that Ethiopia can share is the government of Ethiopia is committed, even for this year of Ethiopian fiscal year, 2011, the government has allocated a very huge hundreds of millions of Ethiopian dollars for the climate resilient wash. And yesterday, in the morning, the state minister for wash has called, the regional bureau heads for discussion on the way how, on the how part of the study and design, part of, technical issues. So regional bureau heads and state ministers, regional governments are taking the lead, and then technical experts are, taking the programmatic activities of program implementation responsibilities. So as Sitali well mentioned earlier, I think we should be very careful and bold enough in making sure that the ministers and the leadership is on board of taking, this initiative for sanitation and water for all high-level meeting. And we need to prepare from the very beginning so that we will be able to deliver, when sector ministers meeting is organized or finance ministers meeting is organized, we will be always there with concrete and substantiated reports and progress reports. That's what I want to share. I will be sharing, some of very important documents to Sitali through email from the GCF, so that country officers, those attendees in this webinar session can have a look at, those tools, different tools of financing and, investment criteria from GCF and other different documents. So I will be sharing those documents to Sitali, and Sitali can put it in the portal for others to download and use it for their country, programming.
Thanks very much, Abera. Does anyone have any additional questions that they'd like to ask? We are just over the 1 hour mark, so if there are questions, we certainly have time to respond to them, but if not, then we'll begin to wrap it up. So, questions, anyone? Comments? I have one for Sitali and Leslie, and it's a very brief one. Recognizing that many of our participants on this particular webinar are representing governments, I understand that there's the opportunity for people to review a tool, but can you remind us how someone could make a suggestion for a tool or a type of tool that maybe they don't see but would be very useful to them as they're either planning for JSR, as we talked about, or in the midst of a planning process?
Marissa, that's an excellent question, actually. We haven't got to that level yet of having a form on there for people to make suggestion, but this is our very next step, so it'll be in the coming days. And as we've been talking in this webinar, I've actually been thinking I can throw this by Sitali at the moment, see what he thinks as well. In the guidance section, I think, Sitali, we could put a permanent link that says, do you see a gap? Could you please let us know what kind of tool do you specifically need? Find a way to say that in 4 words and put it up there on the guidance menu. What do you think of that, Sitali?
I agree. I think so. Just so people know, if you're on the website now, the guidance section that Leslie is referring to will be on your right, just below the search box. So I think putting in there at this question, as you say, I think a very quick way of people knowing if they see if they think there's something missing and they want to contribute, that they click there and then they could maybe find that form or find a way to input very quickly. I think that would be very useful. I just also wanted to say, with regards what Abera was saying about tools on financing and climate finance, or linking WASH with climate finance. I think, Abera, you can submit the documents you have and the materials you have, then Leslie and I and other people also look through that and just make sure it passes the litmus test of so then which building blocks they go into. Some of them will actually can find a home, but it may also be possible that maybe some of those materials might be useful, but maybe in another place, but not here. So just feel free, send us whether it's a link to another place. It will pursue that process. And just to reiterate, I think what Leslie had already said, the materials need to be open source so that we're allowed to actually put them on the website. That's one thing that maybe just might be useful as a reminder. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Sitali and Leslie? Okay. Then I will take the opportunity to thank Leslie again for being so instrumental in creating the Tools Portal, and thank you for your presentation today. If anyone has any questions or comments, I think Leslie had added her email address in the chat, but please feel free to reach out to Sitali or myself, and we certainly can get the feedback and the comments to Leslie. Leslie and Sitali, any parting words before we sign off?
Just a quick one before. So we still have guests that logged in and they didn't give us their names. So we have somebody who I think logged in and they're just identified as guest. It would be good if you gave us your details. That's helpful just for us to, if we need to provide further information and do any follow-up. That's really good. We had Preeti and Anatoly. And we just wanted to also get information about which agency or organization they're with. So I just want to put in that before Leslie speaks in case while these people are still around. Thanks.
And I also just wanted to add a thank you to everybody that participated. Thank you for your interest in this Tools Portal. And stay tuned for the feedback form that's going to be up there and these things we've talked about now. You might even see changes that you suggest implemented. So you might even be part in shaping this tool, continuous improvement, or even if you see a major improvement that you think needs to happen, please let us know. We're completely still in the stage of, it's still malleable how the whole structure works. We want to pin it down and get it completely solidified within a couple of months. But that said, again, just going back to what I said in previous slides, it's a living thing. It always will be. People will always be able to add tools to make tool reviews and things like that. But we really do hope to get the actual tools portals, finalized and solidified and reviewed so that we know that it's a solid initiative. So once again, thanks everyone, and thanks Marissa too for your moderation, and to Sitali too for providing that sort of the higher level the interlinkages and with the SWA. So thanks everybody.
Great, thank you. You all have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much everyone, and have a good day too.